Shout out to MC Dog Entertainment, coolest dude on YouTube. Shout out, to all the fans out there.
Before we jump into this conversation, man, we finna read this right quick so y'all get a broader understanding of what they about to discuss. Because it may not, you know what I'm saying, it may not pertain to a lot of folks, but it's something we need to pay attention to. The Supreme Court decision to effectively end race-conscious admission in higher education last month was historic in its own right, removing the tool that the nation colleges have used for decades to increase racial diversity on their campuses. But what started with affirmative action has morphed into a far broader reconsideration of fairness and privilege in college admissions and what it means for American higher education. On Tuesday, the Education Department announced that it had opened a civil rights investigation into Harvard's university admission preferences for the relatives of alumni and wealthy donors, and what the department billed as a national summit on equal opportunity in higher education in Washington on Wednesday. More than 100 academic, government officials, and education administrators focused on how much is now up for grabs, well beyond affirmative action. We come together today at a turning point in higher education, perhaps in all of education. The Education Secretary Miguel Cardona said in the keynote address, "We didn't ask for this moment, but as leaders, we must answer." Already, especially at elite colleges, there is a widespread discussion of the role of legacy admission, preference for family members of donors, and who benefit from athletic scholarships. Given the court ruling on affirmative action, officials at the conference discussed the importance of developing and expanding other tools to achieve diversity. Those include recruiting through academic enrichment programs for talented, low-income students, improving financial aid, initiating so-called direct admissions, which means automatically admitting students who have met certain threshold requirements, bringing disadvantaged students to campus to generate interest, and making it easier for community colleges students to transfer to four-year colleges. Even how the Supreme Court ruling will be interpreted in its flux. On July 12th, students of fair admission, the plaintiff in the Supreme Court cases, sent a letter to 150 public and private colleges, essentially warning that the organization would be watching them for signs and they were skirting or violating the court decision. But at Wednesday's summit, two federal officials, interpreters of the court decision, fired back saying that they're not a private group. We're the enforcers. I have heard about groups who are not Department of Education or Department of Justice sending school notifications about what they say the law is and what they want you to do. Catherine E. Heyman, Assistant Secretary in Department Office for Civil Rights, declared to the audience, "I offer you this. You will know when you hear from us," she said. She did not name students for fair admissions, but everyone in the audience seemed to know what she was alluding to and responded with clapping and laughter. Ms. L. Heyman said that the court did not rule the working to achieve diversity was unlawful and that her office would be ready to help you, including through technical assistance in determining how to comply with the rule. Kristen Clark, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Justice Department, said it was working on a resource document publicly available next month that analyzes the court decision for colleges. Discussion of race was not flatly forbidden, she said. A black student might want to write an essay about becoming interested in the civil rights law after a field trip to the courthouse, or about learning to cook Jamaican dishes from her mother, both experiencing that she had, Ms. Clark added. As successful as race-conscious admissions have been in creating a pipeline for Black and Hispanic Americans to leadership positions, some social scientists suggested that it's also allowed colleges to shirk a broader responsibility to facilitate social mobility. Racial preference kind let these schools off the hook for a while. Mitchell L. Stevens, an education sociology professor at Stanford University, said, "Still doing away with racial preferences Without some major innovations to replace them, will have enormous impacts on diversity, experts said. Economists who examined admission data from Harvard and the University of North Carolina found that under a policy where Harvard were to remove preferences based on race without changing other aspects of its admission process, the proportion of admitted black students will fall by 2/3. The proportion of admitted Hispanic students will fall to 7%, the total, from about 13%. The estimated decline was similar for the University of North Carolina. Zachary Bleemer, an economist in Princeton who has studied alternatives to race conscious admissions, said that he saw little reason to retain legacy preferences, but that doing away with them would affect a relatively small number of students across the Ivy Plus system and was unlikely to have a democratizing, wait, what's that? Democratizing effect at national scale. At a selected public universities, top percent policies that guaranteed admissions to high performing students at all public high schools in the state had helped increase racial diversity. Dr. Bleemer said he suggested that private universities, especially those in urban areas, could similarly provide large and transparent admission advantages to top students at local lower income schools. The Biden administration investigation of Harvard legacy preference comes in response to a complaint by civil rights advocacy groups that the system favor white applicants. We know that, you know what I'm saying? It's always been like that. There's no indication that similar investigation is scheduled for other schools. Richard Kallenberg, an educational consultant who is proponent of class-based rather than race-based admissions, said that there are always have been symbiotic relationships between racial preference and legacy preferences. Supporter of racial affirmative actions like that, they could point to legacy as evidence that college admissions was not about mediocrity, he said in an email, and supporters and beneficiaries of legacy preference like racial affirmative action, because the racial diversity it produced gave a superficial appearance that the system was fair and open to all. The court decision he made meant that the grand bargain has collapsed and that legacy policies are suddenly more vulnerable than that. So what we're gonna do, man, we're gonna go on and let them discuss it a little bit more. I just wanted to read because sometimes you just want to read like a little bit for yourself to see what's cracking, man. So you know what I'm saying? What this is all about is affirmative action ruling shakes the universities over more than race, you know what I'm saying, than you know, their admissions or whatever. It's like they tripping on the race more than anything. So that's what I look at, man. And it's like it's just constantly going on. And I don't know who in charge of all this, man, but we just need to get rid of them, dog. Real talk. So we finna go and let them respond and let them do their thing, man, and talk. I'm just here to witness the conversation, and I'm gonna give my opinion, man. I love y'all. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, man. Definitely the substance. Vote 2024, and let's get it right, man. Let's make America great again, man. MACA. We finna hear what they gotta say. I'm just finna listen, man. I already read what I read. I'm finna join the conversation, see what they're talking about, man, so we can get more substance and knowledge about this. Let's go.
Talk about the affirmative action ruling. This is something that we covered a few weeks ago, and you mentioned it. So how will that ruling, in your opinion, what's the potential impacts on the education and employment opportunities for every American, and why is that ruling so important?
So, for a couple of reasons. So, the most prestigious institutions in our country no longer have to take race into account as it relates to applicants coming into their schools. And because of that, those institutions are going to continue to be already super white, but they're going to continue to be even more disproportionately white. So what that does, these prestigious institutions are the beacons of power in our country, not just from an education perspective, but from an economic and political perspective. So we are going to have brilliant Black and Latino students across the country who will no longer have access to these institutions because of this recent ruling. So they will no longer have access to the power centers of America. We have a bill, my office has a bill that we're reintroducing this week that says, okay, you want to end affirmative action, you need to end legacy admissions at these institutions as well. Because legacy admissions disproportionately benefit white people, white men in particular. 70% of those who benefit from legacy admissions are white people, white wealthy people. But the Supreme Court didn't deal with that because the Supreme Court is illegitimate because it takes gifts from billionaire donors who support legacy admissions in the higher education space.
So when you say the Supreme Court is illegitimate, what is interesting? It's an interesting word.
The Supreme Court,
expound on that.
There's no way to hold the Supreme Court accountable for unethical behavior. There's also no way to hold the Supreme Court accountable when it takes on a case that isn't within its jurisdiction, like the student loan case, because the case does not, the person bringing the case is not harmed by the lawsuit in which they're pursuing. There's no way for us as Congress to hold the Supreme Court accountable. So when it takes gifts from billionaire donors, it has now become a political body where it's supposed to be a body that acts outside of the political arena. It's also not supposed to be a body that makes policy, which is what it has done with not just this recent student loan decision, but also an EPA decision. Let me also mention what it means for the economics and jobs in our communities. There were many companies that were moving more towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, and minority hiring, and understanding the benefits of that. Now those companies do not have to do that anymore, right? And will not even look in that direction. So they will be least likely to hire African American Latinos in certain companies.
Hey, AI is on the rise though, so a lot of people are gonna be losing their jobs. You know what I'm saying? Depending on who's really, really needed in the physical.
Last thing I'll say about this is this. This is why our own self-determination and building our own collective wealth and our own sovereignty matters so much. Because what we're going to see now, hopefully, is a rise in kids going to HBCUs. But what I also want to see, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, is Black enterprise growing exponentially across this country to hire more Black people and develop more workforce development programs into Black institutions to help us build historic Black wealth. And there's a political aspect to that as well.
Can I just follow one follow-up question? So what kind of gift do the Supreme Court get? You said like they get gifts from.
Yes. So Clarence Thomas had a billionaire pay his child's tuition into a private school.
What? You know what I'm saying? That's why he was thinking he was like in a position system. You know what I'm saying? But in reality, you're not. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's crazy.
Clarence Thomas took trips on yachts with Republican billionaire donors. This is documented. This is fact. There were other gifts given to, I believe, Kavanaugh Roberts as well that have been documented. And so once the Supreme Court begins to take gifts, political gifts, they have lost their legitimacy as a court. And add on top of that, some of the decisions they've made recently supersede what Congress has codified into law. When you take away the Secretary of Education and the President's ability to cancel student loans as per federal law that was passed in 2003, the HEROES Act, then you are now making policy. If you're making policy, you are no longer legitimate as a court. And that's why there's so many in this country calling for Supreme Court reform. And again, the only way to get that is for every person to engage in our political process, vote, so that we can hold people accountable and change the court and Congress.
Facts.
That's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, right? When we talk about job creation and we talk about the influx of potential students now going to HBCUs, one of the things that we have to combat is the technology that's going to be at those HBCUs. So I want to know your thoughts on, because we've seen the reports about what AI is going to do to the job economy, not just here domestically, but from a global standpoint. So what is your thoughts on AI and technology, specifically for our community, but even at a collegiate level, what that looks like for students of color?
Hey, real quick, before they even answer that, it could be downfalls to it because it's like, and it could be advantages for certain people. But if AI is out there and is able to access, it's like just like anybody else that access it, and we can access it too. You can gain whatever you want from it. You can use AI to create businesses or to be able to work for you. You know what I'm saying? AI and the avatars that they allow. You know what I'm saying? It ain't no physical person. So therefore, you can get them to work for you. So it can work in its advantage for getting business done. You know what I mean? Straight up. Get the avatars and use the AI, GPT, the way it is. And I say that it could benefit those that put it in a business aspect.
Well, I'm incredibly concerned because 80% of HBCUs are broadband deserts. So the broadband in their colleges don't work the same as the broadband in Harvard and
Oh,
the mostly white
okay.
institutions. That's number one.
That makes a difference right there. Your broadband and what you can access. Yeah, for sure. Though. That do make sense.
Number two, you all are from Greenberg. You know, in this district, we also have Scarsdale and Rye and very, very wealthy communities. Those wealthy communities, in terms of their school curriculums, they've been way ahead of the game in comparison to certain schools in places like Greenberg, Mount Vernon, the Bronx, because of historic underfunding that's also a part of policy and federal law that's attributed to the redlining of our communities. So, in many ways, we are already behind the eight ball in terms of funding and curriculum and resources. And now, AI, if we don't like step up and do something right now, we will be even further behind the eight ball.
That means that all the billionaires that we have, they not working with us. They're working against us. But just imagine if they worked with us. And I'm not saying us like I'm involved. My cheese ain't like nothing. You know what I mean? I'm straight up. That mediocre cheese. You know what I'm saying? I ain't got it like that. But I just look at it like all these billionaires though, man, that's out there. And they really just lavishing themselves with the most ridiculous things. We understand you got the money to buy 90 cars. We understand that. But we look at it like, why not buy an apartment complex and let the homeless people that stay like in the hood or something move in, or you shower them up first? You know what I'm saying? You a little thrift store they could go through and give them clothes. And it's like we're not working like that. We're not. We know that everybody's supposed to work, but we ain't even working like that. Some people are disabled and can't work. They trying to take their money. You know what I'm saying? They trying to give people, man, that don't even have nothing already, just the bare minimums. You know what I'm saying? And they just hope that it get worse and worse and worse. You know what I'm saying? And then you'll need them, and then they know that you're no longer needed. Then that's when you're depleted. Let's go.
So I'm very concerned about that.
It could be something.
Government
No.
is not ready for this right now. There are 10 fellows in Congress who work in congressional offices focusing on the issue of AI. 10. There are 535 members of Congress. So that shows you just how behind we are. I'm lucky we got one of those fellows. So we are, you all know, I think you know, I sit on the Science, Space, and Tech Committee as well. So not just education and workforce. So we are hyper focused on AI, and we're going to be coming out with legislation to deal with the issue of AI, because it's not just the replacement of workers in certain fields. That is an issue, and that will happen. But we need to make sure that certain workers are protected, like writers in the Writers Guild who are striking right now, and AI is one of the conversations as it relates to their new contract.
Oh, that's another. Yeah, that is another thing too, though, man. If y'all notice at the award show or whatever, the writers they was on strike. Therefore, the ones that be writing on the teleprompters or whatever, they wasn't there. They, you know what I'm saying? There's people that really like be penning shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like a lot of rappers and all that. Real talk. Other people is penning your shit. I like to pen my own. I like to really think like, in a hell of a situation to where I'm like, let me pen it the best way I can. If I don't understand, I'll go to the dictionary. That's what dictionaries, thesauruses are for. You can't go wrong with those if it wasn't no AI or nothing. You can go to that dictionary, that thesaurus and that Bible, and it'll be the same thing like AI though. But artificial intelligence, man, the Jetsons is here, man. So what we need y'all to do is to really, really like focus, man, and like if you care, you will help do something about it. If not, you're just gonna be in a situation when this whole earth is rerouted. You know what I'm saying? Let's go.
But it's also about using AI, understanding AI, using it as a tool. We don't even know what's on the back end of AI in terms of its development and what biases are a part of that. So we got to get in on the ground level to understand how this technology works so
Exactly.
we could build our own technology and then build the wealth that comes with that.
Exactly.
So we use it as a tool, yes, absolutely understanding it, but we also have to create the new technology in order to build the wealth we need to build. And the last thing, we still don't have comprehensive legislation when it comes to technology, social media, safety, security, privacy, none of that. We don't have that at a federal level because Zuckerberg and others have been lobbying to stay away from that because a lot of their wealth is built on their advertising dollars that they get because there's no legislation. So it's mad work to do there. And that's why we're pushing a lot of STEM education into the K 12 space and doing a lot of workforce development outside the K 12 space so that people are aware of what's there and can get in on the ground floor in terms of jobs and entrepreneurship opportunities.
I'm not stating that it's right for, I don't think Clarence should be taking vacations or being on yachts with billionaires. But what's the difference between lobbying and them receiving an inducement or gifts to put a policy in place?
I mean, they're not an elected body, right? So the Supreme Court, they're unelected, they're appointed. They're appointed by the president who's elected. And the Supreme Court's role is to interpret the Constitution and hear arguments and cases in situations where the Constitution may have been violated. That is all they are there for. They are part of a system of checks and balances. The lobbying, especially when we're talking about big money lobbying, that moves us away from a democracy and moves us into a space of a dictatorship and fascism. So there was another Supreme Court case decided a few years back called Citizens United that determined that corporations are people and money is free speech. And when you have that dynamic in play when it comes to our democracy, think about it. How many black billionaires are there? If you combine them, Jeff Bezos alone got way more money than them.
I've been saying that, man. That's what I'm talking about. This one person got more money than all of our billionaires together. And it's a lot of broke and starving people on earth because
Like way more. So when you talk about the history of wealth inequality, if we allow wealth to dictate politics through lobbying, then those who have always had wealth and power will continue to have wealth and power. And the wealth and power was built on the backs of enslaved Africans. And so that's why we got to get big money out of politics overall, but particularly as it relates to the Supreme Court. I mean, look at the last few years' decisions alone. I mean, they made a decision that makes it easier to carry concealed weapons in states like New York. And we know the data shows that the more concealed carry permits you have, the more accidents happen related to gun violence and the more gun deaths you have overall. So big money in politics is a major issue. The good thing is when we talk about black wealth, it has grown a lot recently. And if it is consolidated and codified, we can exercise real power in politics from a congressional level all the way down to local school boards.
Yeah, the Supreme Court is extremely disturbing because, like you said, they're supposed to be above politics. So you can
They're supposed to be not political.
they're supposed
And
to be
just real
non-political.
couple real quick points on that. We can't hold them accountable ethically, so we need ethics reform on the Supreme Court. They have lifetime appointments. So like whoever Trump appointed 3 people, they'll be there for the rest of their lives. That's unacceptable. And then look at the size of the Supreme Court, 9 members. There have been 9 members since 1869. The country was 30 million people there. Country's 300 million people now, 330 million people. They don't even have the capacity to hear cases in the way they need to hear cases. And so there needs to be complete Supreme Court reform, just like there needs to be complete democracy reform with the filibuster and electoral college and many other things. I mean, we're a more diverse, dynamic country than we've ever been. And that's why we got to change a lot of these things.
Can I just have a follow up just to that, and then I'm trying to take his question because I wonder if there was legislation that was put in place behind that, right? When we look at all of our elected officials, they all have terms, whether it's a mayor, it's the governor, it's a congressman, it's the president.
It's talking about design.
Outside of the Supreme Court.
Congressmen don't have terms, though.
Well, we got to run every 2 years.
Well, I'm saying, but there's no limit.
Right, but they could.
Joe Biden was a congressman for 50
What I'm saying
years.
is they have to be reelected every 2 years.
reelected,
And that's it.
yeah.
And that's
They
it.
can't run for anything.
Yeah, they could lose their job, right? Like the only way.
Yeah.
The only way the Supreme Court can lose their job is if they pass
Death.
away. So, what type of support do you think would be behind legislation like that puts terms on Supreme Court and increasing the number?
A lot. Like, so there's a huge disconnect between the people and members of Congress. Members of Congress are trying to maintain the status quo. And the status quo is corporate power, white wealthy male power, evangelical power, and the power of many lobbies like fossil fuels and pharmaceuticals and other lobbies. They want to maintain that power. The people want democracy reform and they want justice. The people can't understand why every time there's a mass shooting with assault rifles, and then we in Congress don't do anything about that. The people are like, what the hell is going on? They become disenchanted. Congress ain't doing shit, so I'm gonna stay home and not vote. And what I've been saying everywhere I go, I'm gonna give you just a couple quick examples. Florida, Texas, Nebraska, Missouri, Mississippi, Indiana. Who am I missing? Few other states. Big Senate races this year. The biggest issue in those states, they're all Republican states, is voter turnout.
Yeah.
If we increase turnout in those states.
And suppression. Yeah.
And suppression, right? Both. If we can increase turnout in those states go from red to blue. And again, Democrats ain't perfect. But if we had a supermajority in the Senate, you would see George Floyd justice and policing. You would see something on voting rights. You would see something on reparations. You would see something on so many issues because now Senate majority leaders don't have no excuse, right? Now, the excuse now is, we don't got the numbers. We got the filibuster. We don't want to go around the filibuster. If we increase the numbers, now we got to go around the filibuster. But that don't happen if we don't increase voter turnout. And that's why, like, next year is huge for this. It's huge.
So what they basically saying, man, is we need to band together, all God's people or whatever, rebuke this devil that's on earth. We don't know who it is, so we can get everything back in order the way it's supposed to really be. We got people saying that these people can't go to this school because of this and that, man. Come on, man. And you're paying to go to school, you're paying to live, you're paying to die. It's like earth is just about a big money thing. And God didn't even build the earth and put money here. He just built the earth. Hey, I'm finna get up out of here, man. I hope y'all got a little knowledge off of that, man, and what they trying to do if you into that. If not, it's like pay attention anyway, because it's just gonna give you signs of just more to come, man. They not finished. But check this out. I'm finished right now, man. Y'all click that button, like, share, subscribe, man, with the coolest dude on YouTube. Hit!
Straight out of Diamond Style Doks.